bounty hunter, slave trader, animal activist, villain, anti-hero, assassin, protector, genocidal maniac. It doesn't matter how you know him. To the DC universe, he is simply the main man. Welcome back to the Comicverse, everyone, and this time we are going to take a deep dive into the sordid history of Lobo, the last Zarnian. Kind of, but we'll get to that later. He's had rivalries with Guy Gardner, Deathstroke, Superman, Supergirl, Neron, the Omegas, various incarnations of the Justice League, and Legion, just to name a few. He's been an archbishop, and he's been the king of hell. He's also been the subject of controversy, not just for his overly gruesome and bloody acts of violence, but also his comic book fandom's outrage at DC's attempt to retcon his entire persona in the middle of launching the new 52 era. Still, throughout it all, he has remained one of the most popular figures in DC's library since his first appearance way back in 1983. But before we begin, we'd appreciate it if you like and subscribe, comment, and share this video out. It really helps out the channel each and every week. Thank you. Lobo is the creation of writer Keith Giffen and artist Roger Slifer. They needed an intergalactic bounty hunter for their 1983 run on the Omega Men, a character with no empathy, no compassion, no qualms about doing a job as long as it was being paid for. Now, if you're not familiar with Lobo's first ever appearance in comics, you may be looking for that familiar biker from the pits of hell persona that we've all come to know and appreciate. Except you would be forgetting that we're talking about 1983, a time of leotards, pastels, and Aquanet. So this is a Lobo you may not even recognize. In issue number 3 of the Omega Men, Lobo is hired by the Citadel to kidnap and imprison Callista, a member of the Omega Men. The cover itself says it all. Full body spandex, yellow and purple color palette, and chemically stiffened hair reaching far above his white face. Still, he had his space cycle, not exactly the spaz frag, but hey, it's a start, and he was given ample story time to develop his character. He would appear in issues 5 and 9 in 1983, then again in 10, 19, and 20 in 1984, and finish his Omega Men run in 1986 with a final appearance in issue 37. Throughout that 3-year span, Giffen and Slifer would develop Lobo's backstory. First off, Lobo was not originally from the planet Zarnia. He was Valorpian, from the planet Valorpia. He was still considered the last of his kind, although it is very hard to kill a Valorpian. If you managed to cut Lobo, 1 drop of his blood would generate a whole new Lobo. 10 drops would give you just as many, and so on and so on. The only way to actually kill a Valorpian was total vaporization. In issue 20, Lobo recounts the loss of his race. With overpopulation and the instinct to survive encoded genetically into every Valorpian, resources became scarce. The Scions, a race with ill intentions, wanted to study Valorpia and their reproduction process. Actually, their reproduction process in return for a hefty payment. The Scions were eventually able to create a simulator that could mimic the Valorpian self-cloning process. However, the Scions did this out of fear that if Valorpia continued to grow in population, it would be forced to travel outward into the cosmos and conquer other races for survival. A real fear considering every Valorpian troop cut down in battle would just spawn hundreds more. No armada or force would be able to stop them. So the Scions also used their research to create a virus based on gene splicing and DNA alterations, then secretly introduced it into the Valorpian environment. The virus rendered all Valorpians impotent. So when a Valorpian bled and eggs were produced, all was stillborn. Only Lobo remained uninfected. The rest of his race slowly died out over time. Now Lobo would eventually get his revenge on all the Scions, and before the Omega Man run came to an end in 1986, it was obvious that Lobo was well received by the general comic book reading public. And then he got his first of many changes in the final issue, issue 37. He got a whole new outfit. Gone was the full body leotard in bright colors. In its place, a black leather coat, a gray t-shirt, and the manic personality replaced with a grim visage of a man with nothing left to lose. Then, Lobo would move on to the big leagues as the 80s drew to a close. In October of 1988, it was time for the Justice League International to meet the main man. Here we would get a more rounded character, a character with some depth. Turns out, Lobo has an affinity for animals, especially ones on the verge of extinction, probably because he is one himself. His home base also served as a sanctuary for the last pod of space dolphins, which he fed and protected from all intruders. We also learn that Lobo has been busy, making a name for himself as a reliable and unstoppable contractor. Issues 18, 19, and 20 give us the Magna Khan story arc. Lobo is hired by this unscrupulous trader to track down Martian Manhunter, Big Barda, and the rest of their crew as they travel through space looking for Barda's missing husband, Scott Free, otherwise known as Mr. Miracle, the most infamous escapee of Granny Goodness's school on Darkseid's home planet of Apocalypse. Turns out, Magna Khan is holding Scott prisoner for use as an offering to Apocalypse so he can open up trade relations with them. When Lobo finds Barda and their ship, Barda immediately knows who he is, and she is frightened. She explains to her crew that Lobo does not mean wolf, like it does on Earth. It translates from the original dialect to the phrase, one who devours your entrails and thoroughly enjoys it. Her fear of Lobo is so great, she uses her staff to dangerously open up a boom tube portal inside their own vessel, just to cast Lobo out across the universe. Unfortunately, the boom tube sends Lobo crashing to Earth, through the window of the Justice League International, and directly into the skull of Guy Gardner, the Green Lantern. This is significant for two reasons. One, Guy Gardner had previously been affected through an accident. Affected how? Well, normally when you saw the name Guy Gardner, you think anger, violence, and poor impulse control. This Guy Gardner was passive, contemplative, calm. Fans hated it. When Lobo collided with Guy, that all changed. He became himself again, gruff, abrasive, and ready for a fight without little reason for one. The second significance to all of this happening is that Lobo finally got his first true arch rival. What better than a Green Lantern? Yes, there was an epic battle between the two that leveled the neighborhood. A battle that ended in a stalemate with Booster Gold restraining Guy and the rest of the Justice League holding back Lobo. The battle even got the attention of the Batman, Superman, and Hawkman. Now, Lobo would lie and weasel his way onto the team in order to wait for Barda and her crew to return, so he could kill them. But eventually, the story brought all of them to Apocalypse and a showdown with Darkseid that settled nothing in the end. Lobo would then end the 80s with his inclusion in issues 3 through 10 of Legion in 1989. It is here that we get a sense of just how homicidal Lobo truly is. Dox, the not-so-benevolent leader of Legion, but pretends to be, uses Lobo to foment a coup on a world that is having trouble dealing with drugs. Lobo easily slaughters hundreds, if not thousands, of security officers with his bare hands. Dox then uses Lobo's blood to create hundreds more Lobo clones, and eventually takes over the government. Dox, ever calculating, then turns on Lobo. The clones are extinguished, and then, in a spectacular final battle, Dox beats Lobo one-on-one. Because of this, Lobo is now at the beck and call of Dox from now on. Although later we learn that Dox may have given himself a chemically induced edge in a not-so-fair fight against the main man, something Lobo will have to reconcile with at a later date. Then, as the 90s begin, we can truly say this was Lobo's decade. He was featured in animated DC works and multiple comic book runs. Even a video game was developed and completed, published by Ocean Software for the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis in 1996 called Lobo, but it was never released. Of course it was a fighting game. It was cancelled because it was a 16-bit game and the industry was already moving into 32-bit. As well, the quality of the game looked unfinished and poor. And yes, there was a leaked copy of the Sega version online at some point. Good luck finding it today. And if you do, let me know what you think of it. Now, there's so much to cover in the 1990s, we have to be selective here. With that in mind, we are going to stick with Lobo's first and second self-titled runs. Basically, Lobo Volume 1 and Lobo Volume 2. It's no secret that the decade of the 90s brought with it a lot of experimental creativity that touched every corner of pop culture. DC Comics and the character of Lobo were prime examples of that, but timing was generous to DC in another way. It was 1990. fresh off the 1989 global phenomenon of Tim Burton's Batman. Comics were booming. Speculation and evaluations on older comics as well as newer titles was at a fever pitch. Yes, the bubble burst a few years later, but DC took the Batman effect and used it to produce so much material. And part of that plan was to place Lobo as a more prominent and featured member of the DCEU. Lobo Volume 1 picks up where we initially left Lobo, at the beck and call of Dox and the Legion. Lobo is depressed, thinking about ending it all. And he is holding his own unauthorized biography, a tale that is not too flattering. Yes, he is surrounded by his space dolphins, and yes, this is the Lobo that everyone knows and loves in terms of looks and style, but Volume 1 also gives us the main man personality to match that would launch Lobo into fanboy heaven. For anyone who wants to really understand the character of Lobo, Volume 1 is required reading. Nothing else gives you more of the backstory, the new backstory, than these books. But first, Lobo has a job to do. Dox summons him to escort a prisoner back to Cairn, Legion's headquarters and home world. Except there's a special stipulation. The prisoner must be delivered alive, no matter what. Unbeknownst to Lobo, the prisoner he is retrieving is a celebrity of sorts on other worlds. In fact, this prisoner knows Lobo very well enough to be the author of the unauthorized biography that depicted Lobo as the genocidal maniac that he is. Even better, we get our own excerpts of that biography as the comic progresses. And of course, we begin with the birth and young life of our Zarnian friend. The title of that first chapter, A Serpent in Eden. Lobo's birth was accompanied by strange sensations felt by the midwife who delivered him. She immediately exclaimed that the baby was the devil incarnate, and up to that point, Zarnia was a place of peace and love. They did not even have a word in their language for conflict or quarrel. That is until Lobo came to be. Shortly after Lobo's birth, the midwife went insane, and of course baby Lobo bit off 4 of her fingers, and the best doctors on the planet attempted to diagnose everything that was going wrong. Was it a rogue gene, demonic possession, or the universe's way of balancing out the overabundance of peace Zarnia enjoyed? No one knew. Lobo's kindergarten teacher had her own thoughts. The child was just a bad little bastard. A direct quote shortly before her untimely death, and a never-solved napalm bombing. By 5, Lobo was running his school. Other children had their throats ripped out, messages in blood left scrawled on the floor, warning others to start putting their faith in the police, punishment, and prison. One thing was for sure, the era of bliss was over. Now back to our story. As Lobo arrives at the galactic prison, he's escorted by the warden to his query's cell. Lobo, his mood agitated at best from having to do such a menial task, takes it out on the prison boss and kills him by smashing him through a wall. Then we get Chapter 2, Overkill. Lobo's biography asks the reader, what's 117 microns long, airborne, of scorpion-like appearance, and burrows into the flesh, causing great black blisters and severe blood poisoning over a prolonged period, before resulting in agonizing and messy death? The Zarnians didn't know either. Yes, Lobo in his high school biology class developed a doomsday virus to just wipe out the entire planet. Something he stuck around to witness, something that made him smile, made him laugh. For Lobo, the enjoyment was just like the first time he enjoyed the soft curves of his first love. But this was several billion times better. Now we know why Lobo is the last Zarnian in the universe. Or is he? Back at the prison, Lobo gets the surprise of his life. As the cell doors open, his cargo is revealed, and he cannot believe it. It can't be. It's infraggin' possible. It's another Zarnian. And her, of all people, her, sitting in front of him is an elderly Zarnian woman, dressed in green and yellow paisley, gaudy jewelry, and glasses to boot. Yes, this is Miss Tribb, Lobo's 4th grade teacher, and someone who had no qualms about telling Lobo to quiet down. For Lobo, the thought that he missed one was gut-wrenching. How could he have missed her? Of all people, her. What was worse? He is supposed to deliver her alive. It was enough to make him smash his head against a wall. The cherry on top? Miss Tribb is the author of Lobo's biography, and she knows Lobo must take her in alive, so he's shit out of luck. Lobo and Miss Tribb make their way back to Cairn, but first a quick stop at a diner. Lobo should have known better. Miss Tribb is not adverse to making trouble. She is, after all, a grammar teacher, and as she sits while Lobo uses the restroom, she starts an argument with the establishment's less than savory patrons over the use of the word ain't. because the word ain't doesn't exist. Now Lobo has to kill everyone before they kill Miss Trib. His day just keeps getting better and better. Chapter 3, An Interview with Death. Legion Psychological Evaluation number 531. Subject, Lobo. Evaluating physician, the late Dr. J.A. Ganoy. Dr. Ganoy wants to know why Lobo kills. Lobo's answer, I don't kill for nothing. The watchwords are, no contract, no kill. Dig, I'm the hitman, see? Assassin to royalty. Executioner to the stars. No pay, no play. Next question. You were known as the Zarnian who killed all the others, just so you could be unique. Lobo's answer, yeah? Well, I'm a remarkable guy. It worked, didn't it? Question. Despite your reputation, you were known as a man of honor. Lobo's response, yep, it's me alright. Don't say one thing and do another. You make a promise, you keep it. You sign a contract, you honor it. You swear revenge, you revenge it. Whatever it takes. At that point in the evaluation, Lobo decided that it was time to get inside the doctor's head for a change and examine his brain. The addendum to the report? An autopsy. Dr. Ganoy's death appears to have been caused by massive trauma to the skull. But this is pure conjecture because we're still unable to locate his head. After the diner incident, Lobo silently pilots his space cycle with Miss Trib riding piggyback, and of course Miss Trib is not very silent. Lobo is subject to a barrage of criticism from his former teacher. Things like, that's your trouble, always thinking with your fists. Why can't you be a good boy? Get a haircut, a proper job, find a nice girl, settle down. At that moment, the universe was a very miserable place for the main man. 10 things to know if you ever encounter Lobo. Number 1, Lobo can analyze any opponent instantly and find their weak spot. Number 2, Lobo is a man of his word. If you change your mind and don't want him to keep his promise, he'll probably kill you rather than renege. Number 3, tracking ability. If he has met his victim once, he can trace them anywhere in the galaxy by tuning into their aura. Number 4, favorite color? Black. Number 5, his bike is a customized Spaz Frag 666. It runs on unleaded. Number 6, Lobo would rather kill someone rather than let a person help him on a job. Number 7, Lobo despises Legion. Number 8, Lobo's idea of the perfect night out is too bizarre and illegal to go into here. Number 9, Lobo's most used expression, Fetal's Giz, short for Fetal's Gizzard or stomach. Number 10, Lobo loathes Captain Comet and everything he stands for, including but not limited to square jaws, goody goodies, democracy, flags, the idea that good can overcome evil, short hair, brown shoes, equality for women, equality for men, basic rights, and most everything else decent. Now it's been a long day for Lobo. It was time to find a motel and rest for the night. After leaving Miss Trib in the room, Lobo goes out for some alone time. Unfortunately, Miss Trib escaped. Where did she go? Well, the local ballet, of course, the Pan-Galactic Demolition Dance Company, and their performance of Rhapsody in Chainsaws. Fetal's Giz. As Lobo storms the theater, the audience is enjoying the show. That is until Lobo causes complete mayhem. Miss Trib cannot understand his problem. She left him a note. After a brief but violent stay, Lobo, knowing that he cannot kill Miss Trib, that he must deliver her alive, does the next best thing. He amputates her legs. Now, a Zarnian of her advanced age may not be able to grow them back, but she can still self-heal. She just wishes Lobo used cleaner instruments. What if she gets an infection? Report card, pupil assessment, student, Lobo, grade 4, assessor, E. Trib. Mathematics, grade Z. Student claims rudimentary number skills are all that's needed for body counts. Languages, grade Z. No aptitude whatsoever, except in foul language. Spelling, grade Z. Appallingly ignorant, except in words connected with pain, death, and their respective administration. History, grade Z. Shows absolutely no interest and claims history is obsolete because he wasn't there. Philosophy, grade Z. When questioned on personal philosophy, he kills the student seated in front of him. Physics and chemistry, E-. Wide knowledge of explosives and instruments of torture, which he insists on demonstrating. Biology, grade E. His best subject has a morbid fascination with things that kill and things that die. Extracurricular activities, debating society, band, refuses to recognize that physical force is not the first resort in discussion dialogues. Sports, blanket ban. More than 50% of school sportsmen currently hospitalized by Lobo. We next see Lobo and Miss Tribb stuck in a holding cell aboard a massive ship. Apparently, they'd been gassed and captured while en route to Karen. Why they were captured, they don't know. They are soon gassed again and fall unconscious. Their captors arrive, cloaked in brown robes and hoods. They remark that the legless one shows promise, but only the sacred bee will tell. As Lobo comes to, we are confronted by the sacred bee. Yep, they've been captured and are now forced to participate in the 14th annual Orthography Commandos Spelling Bee. You are probably as confused as Lobo at this time. Turns out Lobo and Miss Tribb have been taken captive by the Orthography Commandos, a group of very particular individuals who, with religious zealotry, take on the task of making the universe free of the ignorant and the functionally illiterate. Lobo listens as he's chained to the stage with a handful of other unwilling contestants, all of them unable to comprehend exactly what fate has dealt them. The rules of the bee are simple. Spell or die. Win 3 times and you may join the commandos in their eternal crusade or go free. No emotional outbursts, no gum chewing, and all judges' decisions are final. The first contestant is given the word oxymoron. He begins to nervously enunciate letters. O, X, Y, Unfortunately, is not the correct letter. He is immediately obliterated into a puddle of goo. Now Lobo is having fun. This may actually be his kind of game. Miss Tribb is confident Lobo won't even get past the first round. The next contestant is executed shortly after not being able to spell syllabus. Miss Tribb easily spells Sambach. Now for Lobo, his word, genocide. Aha! That word he knows. The contest continues. Others die. Tribb and Lobo advance. Lobo's next word, mutilation. Too easy. Finally, the sudden death round. Spell and conjugate. Miss Tribb laughs. Now Lobo is truly done. But first, he startles one of the last contestants. That counts for an outburst, executed. That leaves just the 2 of them, which means spell, conjugate, and now suggest suitable antonyms. Lobo asks antonyms? What the hell's an antonym? He tells the commandos that this is not fair. Miss Tribb is a teacher for Fetal's sake. The commandos ask if this is true. Miss Tribb tells them yes, she's a teacher, and that Lobo ruined her evening at the ballet, abused her, and cut off her legs. The next thing Lobo knows, he's chained, bound, and muzzled with a half-dozen high-powered weapons trained on him as he's suspended above Miss Tribb and the commandos, who are all holding blunt weapons. For the orthography nuts, the abuse of a sacred giver of literacy can have only one punishment: death. At this point, Lobo's had enough. He breaks his restraints and slaughters the commandos with impunity. From there, Lobo and Miss Tribb eventually make it to Karen, and the prisoner transfer is complete. And now that Lobo has delivered on his promise to ensure Miss Tribb arrives alive, he looks at his boss, Docs, and does the only thing you would expect Lobo to do. He snaps Miss Tribb's neck. After all, he is the last Zarnian. Lobo Volume 2, published in 1992, continues to build on the idea that nothing in this universe means anything of consequence to the main man. At this point, Lobo has freed himself of Docs and Legion and is now free to pursue his own business. How could he anticipate that this next course of business would bring him to the afterlife? So yes, apparently, Lobo can die by other means. In one of the bloodier and more violent fights portrayed in DC Comics, Lobo is cut in half with a close-up blast from a grenade launcher. He regains consciousness only to find that he's not really alive. He's naked, standing in line with thousands of other naked people, mostly elderly, and they are waiting for their turn to get into heaven. The line is about 7 years long. 7 years too long for Lobo, and that's not acceptable. And although everyone in heaven is already dead, he kills them all again as he makes his way to the front of the line. And this includes heaven's administrative security forces. To placate Lobo, an angel is assigned to him to show him past the pearly gates and into paradise, where he immediately begins to perform his own music. Yes, heavy metal, which drives everyone into a frenzy, and soon heaven has devolved into a violent mess. All Lobo wants is to be sent back. He shouldn't be there, but this is not allowed. So the next best thing he can do, cause as much mayhem as possible to make heaven want to give him back. But heaven has another plan. They call the demon Etrigan and have him take Lobo to hell where he belongs. Reluctantly, Etrigan agrees, but only a day later he reappears at heaven's administrative facilities because Lobo is not suffering at all in hell. He's enjoying himself way too much. Heaven has no choice but to take him back. Now at their wits' end and what to do with Lobo, Heaven brings Lobo to the seldom used reincarnation unit. Thinking he's gotten his way, Lobo bids Heaven farewell and the process of rebirth begins. But Heaven has their own way of getting back at Lobo. This time he's sent to 1940s England and born a woman, which only infuriates him more, so after drinking, fighting, and causing total destruction to parts of the great city, he gets the superhero General Glory to kill him again, so he can ransack Heaven and force them to get it right. But Heaven is still determined to get the last laugh, so this time, instead of a woman, he is sent back as a giant killer squirrel. Well, what worked once will work again, and he allows another bounty criminal to kill him and send him stomping back through Heaven buck-ass naked one more time. This time, he just decides to re-kill everyone, which forces Heaven to bring out the big guns. First, Torquemada and the Howling Inquisitors. They last about 2 minutes against Lobo. Then a gaggle of gods: Buddha, Poseidon, the Hindu goddess Lakshmi, the Egyptian goddess Mut, amongst others. Should be a challenge, right? Wrong. Lobo rips out Poseidon's eye, severs Lakshmi's arms, and most of the other minor deities retreat in horror and fear. Now, Heaven has no choice but to relent and do what Lobo wants. He is reincarnated back to his original timeline, although this time he is still cut in half. No problem, he staples himself back together and regenerates, and is now able to finish the bounty he originally started with when this whole fiasco began. A silly story? Yes. A funny story? Sure. But yet, one that defines Lobo as one of the more powerful beings in the DC Comics universe. Throughout the rest of the 90s, Lobo would become an archbishop on a distant planet until he kills the god he serves. He would battle Neron and eventually reign in hell until he got bored, and then something odd happened. Although Lobo as a character was wildly popular, DC Comics thought the whole anti-societal persona had gotten stale. It was just story after story of Lobo delivering blood-soaked disaster after blood-soaked disaster, and they thought he was becoming somewhat of a parody of what he used to be. Hell, Lobo even killed Santa Claus. No worries though, enter the comic book industry disaster that was the New 52, and Justice League issue 23.2, part of Villains Month, which gives us a brand new Lobo. That's right, DC Comics decided to retcon the entire character, beheading and destroying the Lobo of the 90s for a more suave and sinister Lobo, skinnier, slick, and refined. A Lobo for a new generation. And moreover, their explanation for this? The Lobo of the 90s was an imposter. This new Lobo was the real Lobo, who had his name and reputation taken from him. And with it, we also get a whole new origin story. Yeah, I know, it was one of the most hated decisions DC Comics ever made, but they pushed forward thinking that the fan base would eventually accept it. They didn't, so let's take a look at it now and then see how the Rebirth era addressed the controversy. Volume 4 of Justice League, issues 0 through 4, gives us the new Lobo delivering slaves to be tortured for science research. In the process, Hawkman and Lobo battle it out over 3 issues, Lobo getting the better of him, and eventually helps cause the death of the Thangarian warrior. For his payment, he receives the information he wants the most, the location of the imposter Lobo, which he uses to find our 90s icon and put him down for good. Which brings us to 2014's Lobo Volume 3 and our new origin story. When Zarnia was still thriving, it was not a world of peace and love, as it was in the 90s. It was ruled by Callius, an emperor and a religious figure whose blood was connected to the blood and life force of the very planet. Lobo was captain of his personal guard. He was also in love with, and having an illicit affair with, the princess. Oh yeah, this Lobo was also an artist, an oil painter to be exact. Most important to the story, Zarnia had a sister planet, Zarexia, where disaffected Zarnians went to live under different rules. One day while performing the blood ritual, the emperor became sick after drinking the ceremonial mixture of his own blood and the life essence of the planet. His health was directly tied to that of the people and the planet. As he got madder and more ill, so did the people, and the society began to collapse. Lobo is seemingly unaffected by this madness, so he has a choice to make. He believes that if he kills the emperor, then the planet may get better and people will stop massacring each other. Or it could just kill the planet entirely. He decides to turn on his master, but not after having to kill the princess who is defending her father. His decision brings about the worst outcome. As the emperor dies, the planet begins to disintegrate. Lobo does escape with a chalice of the emperor's blood, which he later drinks himself. This is all explained as religious prophecy, as the word Lobo is now reserved for the ultimate doomsday figure, and by causing the death of Zarnia, the Lobo has become a reality. I know, seems pretty complicated to me too, but not to worry, I told you, Zarnia had a sister planet. Later in issue number 6, it is explained to us that Zarnia's explosion causes its sister planet Xerxia to die too, and there was only one survivor at the time, her name Pariah. She reveals to Lobo that she is the one who initially poisoned the Emperor in order to cause Zarnia's destruction and make him the Lobo, that this was all planned out from a revenge-filled mind. Of course, Lobo kills Pariah, and now we're back to the idea that he is the last living Zarnian. I know, we breezed through that, but hey, fans hated this, and yes, I read every issue to make sure I was giving you the whole story, so you don't have to. When DC Comics realized they needed to pivot away from the New 52 and win the fans back in a lot of different ways, we get 2016's Rebirth era, a kind of soft reboot. And with that, we get a resolution to the Lobo issue. Issues 9 through 12 of Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps ran the Bottled Light storyline. Agent Orange, working with a reconstituted Brainiac 2.0, were trying to miniaturize and bottle up everything in the known universe for their own personal keeping. The Green Lanterns, teaming up with the Sinestro Corps, eventually raid Okara and defeat Agent Orange and Brainiac. Guy Gardner, Hal, and the rest of the Green Lanterns begin breaking open the bottles and releasing the miniaturized treasures, restoring them to original form. However, Guy Gardner picks up a bottle that, amusingly, contains the New 52 Lobo. Trapped inside, Hal stops Guy Gardner from smashing it, takes the bottle, and tells him maybe this one is best left on the shelf. The main man officially returns in issue 1 of 2016's Justice League vs. the Suicide Squad, when Maxwell Lord frees him and other forgotten retcon villains from their quote-unquote prison. But really, how it happened doesn't really matter. What was clear, DC was trying to make right what they got so horribly wrong. And there you have it, a brief, abridged, and very bloody history of Lobo, the main man. Now set to debut on the screen in the upcoming Supergirl film from DC Studios, let's hope they get him right. I hope you enjoyed this look back at pop culture and comic book history. I thank you for watching. If you want more pop culture fun, click on the thumbnail at the end of the video for our look back at the most dangerous woman in Gotham City, Poison Ivy. You'll be glad you did. Until next time, remember, I'm still your reluctant gringo from somewhere south of the border. Salut and a huevo.